You keep praying for change, but every night you rehearse the identity that keeps you trapped. The subconscious isn't ignoring you, it's obeying you, and what it's obeying might terrify you. Night after night, you lay your head down believing tomorrow will be different, yet something unseen locks the door before morning arrives. It's not fate, it's not failure. It's the quiet image of yourself you keep feeding in the dark. While your conscious mind begs for expansion, your heart repeats a smaller truth over and over until it hardens into law. The subconscious doesn't negotiate, it doesn't inspire or encourage, it accepts, it records, it builds. And it builds from the version of you that speaks most often when no one is listening. This is why effort feels cursed. This is why desire feels mocked. Somewhere between your last thought at night and your first breath in the morning, an agreement is being signed, one that determines what you're allowed to become. And the most dangerous part, you may have already agreed without knowing it. There is a fracture you don't want to look at. It lives between who you claim to be when the sun is up and who you become when the lights are off. By day, you are articulate. You declare intentions with conviction. You pray with clean words and upright posture. You speak of growth, of destiny, of becoming more than you were. You tell yourself, and anyone who will listen, that you're ready, that you've learned, that you've changed. You hold hope like a badge, polished and visible, proof that you are not the person you used to be. But night does not listen to speeches. Night listens to whispers. And when the room goes quiet, when the phone is face down and the world no longer mirrors you back to yourself, something else takes over. A smaller voice, a tired one, a voice shaped by disappointment and memory, a voice that does not announce itself as sabotage, but as realism. Be honest, it says. This is who you really are. Don't get ahead of yourself. People like you don't just change. Tomorrow, we'll see. This is the moment no one teaches you to fear, because you think prayer is louder than repetition. You think desire outweighs rehearsal. You think the subconscious responds to your best intentions. It doesn't. It responds to your most familiar identity. And the tragedy, the unbearable, slow-burn tragedy, is that you keep rehearsing the wrong one. Every night, without ceremony, you collapse back into the image you know best, the version of you shaped by old failures, unfinished conversations, silent comparisons, and a lifetime of subtle no's. You don't choose it consciously. That's what makes it lethal. It feels like rest, like honesty, like letting your guard down. But what you're really doing is betraying yourself in your sleep. You ask for expansion, then close your eyes imagining constraint. You pray for elevation, then drift into scenes of limitation. You beg for a new chapter, then fall asleep rereading the same paragraph. And the subconscious, faithful, obedient, merciless, takes notes. It does not argue with you. It does not comfort you. It does not correct your self-image. It says, understood. This is the hidden problem, not lack of discipline, not lack of faith, not lack of effort. Those are the stories you cling to because they still preserve dignity, because they allow you to believe you're doing something wrong, rather than being something conflicted. The truth is quieter and far more devastating. You are divided. Your days are filled with longing. Your nights are filled with confession. And the subconscious believes the confession. Because when you're tired, when the performance drops, when the defenses soften, that's when it assumes you're telling the truth. This is why progress keeps dissolving. This is why breakthroughs flirt and vanish. This is why it feels like something invisible keeps pulling you back, not violently but patiently. You are not being punished. You are being obeyed, and the obedience is precise. Every time you fall asleep feeling like someone who almost gets there. Every time your final thought is maybe next time. Every time your body sinks into the mattress carrying the weight of who you think you are, another imprint is sealed, not in the mind you control, but in the one that controls you. And the most unbearable realization, the one that makes your chest tighten right now, is this. You've been loyal to the wrong version of yourself, not because you wanted to be, but because it felt safer than believing the unfamiliar. And as this recognition creeps in, something starts to tremble. Because if this is true, then the problem was never out there. It was waiting for you every night, in the dark, in the quiet. right helping you sleep. There is a moment just before sleep when honesty becomes brutal, not the honesty you perform, not the honesty you polish for daylight, but the honesty that leaks out when your body is heavy and your will is tired. That is where the split reveals itself. You feel it, don't you? That subtle drop in your chest when the day ends and nothing really changed. That quiet inventory of disappointments you pretend not to count. That reflexive sigh that says more than your prayers ever did. This is where the self-betrayal loop tightens, because you don't fall asleep thinking, I am becoming. You fall asleep thinking, this is how it always goes. And that thought, soft, unchallenged, familiar, has more power than 1,000 affirmations shouted at noon. You tell yourself you're just being realistic, that you're tired of false hope, that you don't want to be disappointed again. But realism, when repeated nightly, becomes an identity. And identity, when impressed into the subconscious, becomes destiny. Here is the part that hurts the most to admit. You don't just fear failure, you fear change. Because change would require you to release the version of yourself you understand, even if that version is small, wounded, and exhausted. At least it's familiar. At least you know how to survive inside it. The unknown self, the one who actually expands, receives, stands differently in the world, that one feels dangerous. So at night, you retreat. You shrink back into the old shape, the old posture, the old emotional gravity, not dramatically, quietly. You replay conversations where you didn't speak up. You imagine futures where nothing really shifts. You feel the ache of wanting without the risk of expecting. And your subconscious, listening closely, absorbs the message. Stay here. This is who we are. This is what's safe. This is the contradiction tearing you apart. By day, you chase possibility. By night, you anchor limitation. By day, you ask. By night, you confess doubt. And the subconscious always sides with the confession, because confession carries emotion. And emotion is the ink it writes in. That's why effort feels cursed. That's why motivation burns out so fast. That's why even your victories feel temporary, fragile, unreal. You're trying to build a future while sleeping in the past. And no one ever told you that the subconscious doesn't follow your goals. It follows your image. The image you collapse into when no one is watching. The image you allow when you stop trying. The image you accept as me when the day is done. This is not about willpower. This is not about positivity. This is about the version of yourself you keep returning to for comfort. And here's the unbearable tension that lingers now, thick and unresolved. If the subconscious is obeying that version, if it is building your life from that nightly agreement, then what have you been authorizing every single night without ever signing your name? The room grows quieter now, not peaceful, charged. Because something is beginning to dawn, not as an answer but as a disturbance, a suspicion that there is a law at work beneath all this effort, a mechanism you were never taught to see, an invisible order that has been running your life with frightening precision. And once you glimpse it, you can't unsee it. There is a moment just before sleep when honesty becomes brutal. Not the honesty you perform, not the honesty you polish for daylight, but the honesty that leaks out when your body is heavy and your will is tired. That is where the split reveals itself. You feel it, don't you? That subtle drop in your chest when the day ends and nothing really changed. That quiet inventory of disappointments you pretend not to count. That reflexive sigh that says more than your prayers ever did. This is where the self-betrayal loop tightens. Because you don't fall asleep thinking, I am becoming. You fall asleep thinking, this is how it always goes. And that thought, soft, unchallenged, familiar, has more power than 1,000 affirmations shouted at noon. You tell yourself you're just being realistic, that you're tired of false hope, that you don't want to be disappointed again. But realism, when repeated nightly, becomes an identity. And identity, when impressed into the subconscious, becomes destiny. Here is the part that hurts the most to admit. You don't just fear failure. You fear change. Because change would require you to release the version of yourself you understand, even if that version is small, wounded, and exhausted. At least it's familiar. At least you know how to survive inside it. The unknown self, the one who actually expands, receives, stands differently in the world, that one feels dangerous. So at night, you retreat. You shrink back into the old shape, the old posture, the old emotional gravity, not dramatically, quietly. You replay conversations where you didn't speak up. You imagine futures where nothing really shifts. You feel the ache of wanting without the risk of expecting. And your subconscious, listening closely, absorbs the message. Stay here. This is who we are. This is what's safe. This is the contradiction tearing you apart. By day, you chase possibility. By night, you anchor limitation. By day, you ask. By night, you confess doubt. And the subconscious always sides with the confession, because confession carries emotion. And emotion is the ink it writes in. That's why effort feels cursed. That's why motivation burns out so fast. That's why even your victories feel temporary, fragile, unreal. You're trying to build a future while sleeping in the past. And no one ever told you that the subconscious doesn't follow your goals. It follows your image, the image you collapse into when no one is watching, the image you allow when you stop trying, the image you accept as me when the day is done. This is not about willpower. This is not about positivity. This is about the version of yourself you keep returning to for comfort. And here's the unbearable tension that lingers now, thick and unresolved. If the subconscious is obeying that version, if it is building your life from that nightly agreement, then what have you been authorizing? Every single night, without ever signing your name. The room grows quieter now, not peaceful, charged. Because something is beginning to dawn, not as an answer but as a disturbance, a suspicion that there is a law at work beneath all this effort, a mechanism you were never taught to see, an invisible order that has been running your life with frightening precision. And once you glimpse it, you can't unsee it. There is a moment when this law finally touches you, where your breath changes. Not relief, not fear exactly, something closer to vertigo. Because suddenly your memories rearrange themselves. You start to see patterns that were invisible before. Not coincidences, consistencies. You remember nights when you went to sleep heavy with resignation, and mornings that arrived already defeated. You remember times when hope flickered briefly, only to be extinguished by the same quiet inner verdict. This isn't really for you. And the law whispers back through time. You told me who you were, not once, not loudly, but faithfully. This is the part that feels unforgivable. The subconscious does not respond to your peak moments. It responds to your resting state. Who you are when you stop trying to be someone else. Who you are when effort dissolves. Who you are when the performance ends. That is the identity it serves. Think of it as a mirror that does not reflect faces, only postures. And every night you lie down in one. Sometimes it's a posture of waiting, sometimes of bracing, sometimes of quiet defeat masked as humility. You don't say I am limited, you feel it. You don't say I don't expect much. Your body relaxes into it, and the subconscious reads the body faster than words. It reads the sigh, the heaviness, the emotional aftertaste of the day. It reads what you assume. Assumption is the most powerful command you give, because assumption feels true without effort. It feels natural. It feels earned. And whatever feels natural becomes law inside the subconscious. This is the covenant, not a promise made aloud, but an agreement lived in silence. Night after night you reaffirm it, not through intention, but through identity, through the unspoken conclusion you carry into sleep about who you are and what is realistic for someone like you. The law does not rush, it does not force. It simply enforces alignment. If you assume struggle, it aligns struggle. If you assume delay, it aligns delay. If you assume limitation, it aligns circumstances that confirm it. Not as punishment, as coherence. This is why the universe has felt eerily consistent, not cruel. Consistent. And now the final unsettling realization presses in, slowly, deliberately. If this law responds to the image impressed before sleep, if it amplifies what is most frequently felt and assumed, then the most powerful creative act of your day is not what you do, it is what you become for those final, unguarded moments. And that thought does not resolve anything yet. It destabilizes, because tonight is coming. Inevitable, quiet, patient, and the law will be listening again. The question is no longer whether it works. The question, the one that lingers like a held breath, is this: what identity will you rest inside when the lights go out and the subconscious opens its ledger, waiting to obey? If something inside you feels exposed right now, if there's a quiet discomfort moving through your chest, not panic, not clarity, but recognition, that is not accidental. That is the moment when an old identity realizes it has been seen, and moments like this are fragile, because recognition, if left unanchored, fades. The mind rationalizes, the body returns to habit, the night comes, and the old agreement resumes its place. This is why this moment matters, not because of a video, not because of a channel, but because awareness without declaration dissolves. The law you just felt does not respond to passive insight. It responds to alignment. And alignment begins with a signal. A small one, a simple one, but one that says, I am no longer unconscious of this. So if this realization stirred something uncomfortable, yet undeniably true, if you felt that internal flinch, the one that says, this is about me, anchor it, not later, now. When you like this video, you are not feeding an algorithm. You are marking a moment of recognition. You are telling your nervous system, this mattered. When you comment, when you put into words what you're realizing, you are pulling it out of the shadows. You are collapsing secrecy. You are interrupting the silent loop that has been running unchecked. And when you subscribe, you are doing something deeper than following content. You are making a quiet public declaration. I am someone who notices. I am someone who is paying attention now. I am preparing for a different agreement. The subconscious listens to what you commit to repeatedly, to where you return, to what you choose to keep near. This is not promotion, this is placement. You are choosing what frequency you keep around you, what reminders echo back to you, what language lives close to your inner world. And if you felt seen, uncomfortably, precisely, then this is the moment to respond, not with effort, not with promises, but with alignment, because the night is coming either way, and something in you already knows you don't want to enter it the same way again. There is no technique powerful enough to override identity, no routine strong enough to compete with what you feel yourself to be. So the shift does not begin with action, it begins with placement. Not what you do before sleep, but who you allow yourself to be as sleep takes you. This is where most teachings fail you. They rush toward methods, steps, formulas. They give you something to perform, something to remember, something to get right. But performance belongs to the day. Night responds only to state. The subconscious does not accept instructions. It absorbs atmosphere, and atmosphere is created by imagery. Not visual images alone, but felt images. Scenes saturated with emotion. Moments your body believes are real. The shift is this. You stop trying to fix yourself at night. You stop reviewing. You stop negotiating. And instead, you place yourself. Gently, deliberately, without force. You choose an inner position, an identity posture, and you rest there. Not affirming, not repeating words, resting. Imagine this like choosing where to sit in a dark room. You don't argue with the chair. You don't explain yourself to it. You simply lower your weight and let it hold you. The subconscious recognizes this immediately. Because placement carries authority, what you rest into feels assumed, and assumption is its native language. This is not about imagining outcomes. Outcomes create pressure. This is about inhabiting a version of yourself. One that feels slightly unfamiliar but calm. Expanded but not excited, certain but not loud. You are not visualizing success. You are letting your nervous system taste a different baseline. How does this version of you breathe? How does your chest feel? What is the emotional temperature? Not joy, not euphoria. Something quieter. Stability, permission, a subtle sense of being allowed. And here is the paradox that makes this work. The subconscious trusts what feels natural, so you don't leap into a fantasy identity. You don't pretend to be someone impossibly distant. You shift 1 degree, from hoping to assuming, from longing to expecting without urgency, from wanting to being oriented toward. You let yourself fall asleep as someone for whom change is not dramatic, but inevitable. This is not a thought, it's a posture. Your jaw unclenches, your breath slows. Your body settles as if the question has already been answered, and the subconscious notices, because this is different from desperation, different from pleading, different from effort. This feels like truth, and truth, felt, not spoken, is what it records fastest. But here is where the tension tightens again, because to do this, you must let go of the familiar pain. The nightly identity of the struggler, the one who almost gets there, the one who braces for disappointment. And that identity has kept you company for a long time. So as you begin to sense this shift, something resists, a quiet panic, a whisper that says, "Don't get ahead of yourself." And the question hangs, delicate, unresolved. Are you willing to rest in an identity that has not yet been proven and let the subconscious do what it has always done best? This is where the shift becomes uncomfortable, not because it is difficult, but because it is quiet. There is no struggle to cling to, no familiar ache to justify your exhaustion, no inner monologue rehearsing why it hasn't worked yet, just stillness. And stillness is threatening when your identity has been shaped by tension. As you begin to rest into this new placement, even briefly, you may notice a strange grief surface, a subtle mourning for the version of you who was always trying, always hoping, always waiting for permission. That version believed effort was safety, that suffering was proof of sincerity. Letting go of that posture can feel like betrayal. If I stop trying, now who am I? If I stop rehearsing my pain, what holds me together? This is the hidden resistance no one talks about, because the old identity, as limiting as it was, gave you something, a story, a reason, a familiar emotional gravity, and now you're being asked not to destroy it, but to outgrow it. So the shift must be gentle. You don't force yourself into certainty, you don't demand belief. You simply allow a different orientation. Instead of falling asleep reviewing what went wrong, you let your body feel what it would be like if nothing needed fixing right now. Instead of collapsing into exhaustion, you rest as if the weight has already shifted, just slightly. Instead of hoping tomorrow will be different, you allow the assumption that something is already rearranging, quietly, without your supervision. This is not pretending. Pretending is tense. This is permission. Permission to stop arguing with the future. Permission to stop guarding against disappointment. Permission to stop being the one who always prepares for lack. And the subconscious, attentive, literal, registers the change immediately. Because the signal has shifted, not dramatically, but unmistakably. You are no longer asking. You are no longer pleading. You are resting as someone who expects alignment. That expectation does not shout. It does not sparkle. It settles. And settling is how identity imprints. This is why the final moments before sleep are sacred, not because they are mystical, but because they are unguarded. Whatever you allow yourself to be there, whatever emotional climate you sink into, that is what the subconscious accepts as instruction. So you don't repeat this once, you don't make it a ritual to perfect, you return. Night after night you choose the same placement, not to force change, but to familiarize yourself with a new baseline, a new sense of self that feels calmer than hope, quieter than desire, steadier than effort. And slowly, so slowly you almost miss it, the old nightly identity loosens its grip, not because it was defeated, but because it was no longer needed. Yet even now, nothing is resolved, because this shift carries a risk. If you rest as someone who expects alignment, if you allow this identity to take root, then you are no longer protected by pessimism. You are no longer shielded by low expectations. You are exposed, and the night is still coming, waiting, listening. At some point, quiet, unannounced, you realize the shift is no longer something you do. It is something you are. This is where the ground moves beneath your self-image, because you are no longer the person pleading with the night, no longer the one hoping the subconscious will finally cooperate, no longer the one negotiating with fate or bracing for disappointment. You become something far more dangerous to the old order. You become the author, not loudly, not dramatically, internally. You begin to sense that the version of you who appears at night is not an accident, not a collapse, not a default setting, but a role, one you have been unconsciously casting for years. And now you are awake to it. This awareness alone fractures the old identity, because the old you believed the night happened to them. That fatigue dictated truth, that whatever surfaced in the dark was real. But the new configuration sees something else. You see that the night self is not the truest self. It is simply the most rehearsed. And rehearsal can be changed. This is where power enters, not as domination, but as authority. The authority of choice. You begin to feel it in subtle ways, in how quickly you catch the familiar emotional slide, in how you no longer fully identify with the heaviness when it appears, in how you notice, this is the old posture trying to return. And instead of fighting it, you simply don't sit there anymore. You choose a different inner seat. This is the identity rupture. Because for so long, your sense of self was bound to effort, to struggle, to endurance. You were the one who keeps going, the one who survives, the one who tries. Those identities feel noble, but they are still identities of lack. Now something else forms. You are the one who expects alignment without noise, the one who does not rehearse despair in private, the one who understands that quiet agreement carries more weight than spoken desire. You stop needing proof, not because you have it, but because you no longer require it to be who you are at night. And this is unsettling, because the world has not yet caught up. Externally, nothing may have changed. Circumstances may look the same, challenges may still exist, but internally, the center of gravity has shifted. You no longer collapse into sleep. You enter it, with intention, with authorship. You feel the difference in your body. Less bracing, less tension. A subtle dignity replaces desperation, and this is where the old self panics. Because the old self survived by vigilance, by replaying, by preparing for disappointment. And now that vigilance is no longer in charge. You are. But with that authority comes a new tension. Because if you are the one who authors the night self, if your quiet agreement truly carries weight, then there is no one left to blame. And that realization is both liberating and terrifying. This is where the transformation becomes dangerous to who you were. Because the moment you accept authorship, you lose the comfort of unconsciousness. You can no longer say, "That's just how I am at night." You can no longer pretend the heaviness is truth instead of habit. You can no longer hide behind exhaustion as an excuse for self-erasure. You see the pattern now, and once seen, it cannot be unseen. You recognize the exact moment when the old identity tries to reclaim you. The subtle slump of the shoulders, the familiar emotional gravity pulling you back into rehearsal. The mind offers you the same script it always has. Relax. Don't expect too much. Be realistic. But something in you no longer answers. Not because you are resisting, but because you are no longer available for that role. This is the quietest form of power. You don't fight the old identity. You outgrow it. And the most shocking part? You realize how long you confused suffering with sincerity. You believed that carrying heaviness meant you were being honest, that bracing for disappointment was wisdom, that staying small was humility. But humility was never meant to be self-erasure. Now a different self-perception stabilizes. You are not someone who hopes the subconscious will respond. You are someone who understands how it listens. You are not someone begging reality to change. You are someone who chooses what reality is built from. You are not waiting to feel worthy before resting differently. You rest differently because you understand worth was never the gate. And this reconfiguration does not announce itself to the world. It is private, internal, unimpressive, which is exactly why it is real. You begin to trust the quiet moments more than the dramatic ones. You begin to value consistency over intensity. You begin to sense that the true turning points in life happen without witnesses. And yet, a new vulnerability opens. Because when you no longer identify as the struggler, when you no longer take refuge in trying, what happens if the world doesn't change fast enough? What happens if the evidence lags behind the identity? This is the final tension of this block. You are standing in a new internal posture, but the external mirror has not yet shifted. And the temptation returns. Subtle, seductive, go back, brace again. At least that version knew how to survive. But you feel it now, that returning would not be safety. It would be regression. So you stand internally, without proof, without guarantees, without applause. You stand as the one who knows that the night listens, that the subconscious obeys. That identity, once reconfigured, does not need to argue. And still, the night is coming. And with it, the moment that decides whether this identity holds or dissolves back into habit. Tonight is not dramatic. There will be no sign, no confirmation, no sudden certainty arriving like a revelation wrapped in light. Just the ordinary approach of night. The same ceiling, the same room, the same body lowering itself into the same bed. And yet, nothing is the same. Because now you know where the true threshold is. Not in the morning, not in action, not in effort, but in the quiet seconds when the world releases you and you decide without words who you are allowed to be. The subconscious will open, as it always does, patient, neutral, listening. It will not test you, it will not question you, it will not ask whether you deserve what you are about to imprint. It will simply receive the atmosphere you carry, the posture you rest in, the identity you allow yourself to inhabit when nothing is required of you. This is where the agreement is made, not loudly, not consciously, but completely. And there is a strange reverence in realizing this, because the final moment before sleep is no longer empty time. It is not recovery. It is not collapse. It is authorship. You may feel the old gravity tug at you tonight, the familiar heaviness, the temptation to shrink back into what you know. That does not mean you failed. It means the old identity remembers where you used to sit. You don't need to fight it. You don't need to correct it. You only need to choose where you rest. And that choice, barely perceptible, deeply internal, is enough. Not because it guarantees outcomes, not because it forces results, but because it changes what is being obeyed. So when the lights go out, when the room goes still, when thought softens into feeling, pay attention, not to what you want, not to what you fear, but to who you are being as you cross that line. Because the subconscious is already listening, and the next agreement is about to be signed.